we are glad to have the members of the CDFI Fund with us, Jodie Harris and Michelle Dickens. And the purpose of today's meeting is just to get some updates and reconnect with Jodie and Michelle. It's been a while since we've had them on a webinar, and so we welcome Jodie and Michelle. I want to introduce Jodie. Jodie is the director of the U.S. Department of Treasury Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. The CDFI generates economic growth opportunity in some of our nation's most distressed communities by offering tailored resources and innovation programs that invest federal dollars alongside private sector capital. The CDFI Fund serves mission-driven financial institutions to take the market-based approach to supporting economically disadvantaged communities. Jodie has worked in both the public and the private sectors for over 25 years. Following her start as a commercial real estate and community development credit analyst, Jodie served as president of a small nonprofit consulting firm providing technical assistance, education, and small business development for entrepreneurs. She spent several years in strategy and business architecture division of Accenture LLC, working with a wide range of clients, including financial institutions, nonprofits, technology companies. Jodie has extensive experience in policy research and has worked as a policy analyst with New York University Institution of Education and Social Policy with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where she focused in low-income food programs. And we also have Michelle Dickens, Program Manager, Office of Certification, Policy and Evaluation with the CDFI Fund's U.S. Department of Treasury. Michelle Dickens is a program manager for certification within the certification, compliance, monitoring, and evaluation team at the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. As the program manager of certification, Michelle provides oversight of all community development financial institution certification programs and related activities that support associated CDFI Fund programs. So with that being said, and we have the introductions there, I want to welcome everyone again. And I would also like to introduce our newest staff member, which is Dr. Kristen Wagner. Kristen will be in charge and overseeing the national programs for the Native CDFI network. So we welcome Michelle. And then I would also like to welcome Ian Record. Ian has been providing assistance for the Native CDFI network over the last couple of months as a consultant, and Ian plays several roles with the Native CDFI network and provides backroom support for me. Really keeps our program moving forward. Right now we're in a position of transition, so we are adding team members and we're developing our team as we speak here. So without taking too much time away from Jodie and Michelle, we also have with us today, we have a member of the SSBCI team to answer any questions regarding the SSBCI. And Zachariah, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right. Hello there. Yeah, so sorry about that. We had a little rough start of getting everybody in, so we may have had a Zoom link that was not populated right, so I apologize for that. But Michelle, I would like to welcome you, and I'd like you to take over the podium and maybe give us just an overall update of what's been happening with the NACA program and the CDFI Fund.
Well, actually, Pete, if you don't mind, I'll start for the CDFI Fund, and then Michelle can jump in on some certification issues. But I think I can speak for Michelle to say thank you for the invitation to meet with you all today. It's exciting to meet, even if it's virtually, with the Native CDFI network and for the opportunity to connect. So we hope we can answer all your questions, and I'll just give a couple overviews on some of our big initiatives. We wanted to just start off by saying that some of the big things that we're working on, you probably read about fairly often through our Gov Delivery notices. So for anyone who's on the call who's not signed up for the CDFI Fund Gov Delivery notices, please log on and sign up there, because we'll have several program updates that won't be covered today, but as we go on throughout the calendar year, you'll have more information on our program. And one of the things that we use the Gov Delivery for, and we like to participate in these webinars for, is because we appreciate the opportunity to connect with different associations, and we really appreciate the integral role that the Native CDFIs play in facilitating access to capital and credit in Indian country. So by interacting with you all today, it's a valuable opportunity for us to also learn about what you're working on and to learn about issues that you're facing as Native communities. And so as we get into the Q&A, feel free to share some of your thoughts about that as well. So I'll start off with, I think, what is the big program that's on everybody's mind is the $1.75 billion that was enacted at the end of 2020 to support COVID-19 relief efforts. Last summer, we awarded $1.25 billion under what we call the Rapid Response Program, and that included $54.6 million in awards to 58 Native CDFIs. That $1.25 billion was part of a $3 billion appropriation to the CDFI Fund, and so the remaining $1.75 billion will come out later on this spring, and it is designed to support lending in minority communities. And along with RRP, it is designed to support COVID-related activities in minority communities. RRP was more of we called it Rapid Response Program for a reason. It was more of a rapid program to inject CDFIs with immediate capital. This program is looking at some of the long-term impacts of COVID-19 that you're seeing in your communities. So we'll be providing additional details over the next few months. We will be launching the program this spring, as I mentioned. There'll be our typical webinars on how to apply it and how to get ready. But I do want to highlight that there will be a focus on serving COVID-impacted communities, minority communities, as well as low and moderate income minority communities. And we are working through some implementation questions that we have now, which is part of the reason for the delay. But we do believe that we'll be able to craft the program in a way that ensures that grant funding will achieve the goals outlined in the bill, which are focused on providing resources to CDFIs that will allow you to expand your activities in your community, especially in distressed and underserved areas that were hardest hit by the economic shock of the pandemic. And so this is taking somewhat of a more direct approach in how we design our program. Most of you that are familiar with our CDFI program, it's more about the organization and about the business plan and the strategy. But this program, we're really trying to get at the impact, how this funding will impact your community in the long and the short term. So as I mentioned, we'll make resources available in the near future. In the coming weeks, we'll be releasing how you can start applying for the program. And as I mentioned, please subscribe to the Gov Delivery, because that is how you will learn all things in real time. I'm now going to switch over to certification, and I'll cover this in broad strokes. And when we get to the Q&A, Michelle and I can take all the questions. But I want to say that Michelle and her team are making really, really strong progress on the certification application. As you all know, this is a process that has taken several years for us to wade through, but we want to make sure that we get it right, especially during a time when the expectations of CDFIs are so high. I think the $3 billion in the stimulus funding is a testament to how the administration, as well as the private sector, are seeing CDFIs as an integral part in the recovery of this country, as well as getting into those places that large traditional financial services do not seem to go and are not making as big of an impact as our CDFI community. More information will be available in the next several months, and I want to emphasize that we plan on providing abundant time to transition to the revised application, the annual certification report, as well as a new transaction level report. I also want to address what we've heard as some concerns, and you all can tell me if I'm right on this later on, but we've had some concerns that we're going to make kind of random, arbitrary changes to the application, and that we're going to provide little time for you all to adapt to the new application. So I want you all to rest assured that the CDFI Fund is only contemplating the inclusion of questions and tests previewed in the 2020 request for comments, with potentially some modification. We received really robust responses to our request for information through our PRA Act that we posted in 2020. So the team has been very deliberate and intentional in reviewing those answers and making any necessary changes. In addition, there should be no doubt that with a revised application, with a revised annual certification report, as well as a new reporting requirement, that we will not give substantial advance warning. We are still working out the process for trying to onboard existing CDFIs to a new process, as well as certify new institutions. So there will be lots of warning on how this process will go. This will be a phased approach. We won't post guidelines on September 1st and expect everyone to be recertified by September 30th. So rest assured that we will provide a lot of information for how to become certified under the new guidelines. And we do hope to work with the Native CDFI Network to do something like this, like a webinar, to give some targeted direction and answer Q&A. I also want to address something that we noted late last year, that we have discontinued our policy of providing determinations on new certification applications within 90 days. And I know that was a shock and a disappointment to some people, but at some point in the future, we do hope to be able to return to a definitive window for application reviews. When the stimulus COVID-19 recovery funding was announced, the $3 billion, we saw a huge uptick in applications. And many of those applications were either incomplete or were from organizations that, quite frankly, had not taken the time to determine if they were eligible for CDFI certification. So Michelle and her team in the past have done a lot of back and forth with applicants to help make sure that their applications end up including all of the information necessary for a review. But quite frankly, we just don't have the resources for that right now. And what we've seen is that groups will send in 3 out of the 7 tests, will send in information for 3 out of the 7 tests to get into the queue, and because they know that the team will continue to work with them. But now we have to say, unfortunately, if your application is fatally flawed or you don't have all the information, you've got to get out of the queue and get back in the queue. So with that new process, we're unable to say that it'll take us 30, 60, or 90 days to review an application. So I do hope that you all can bear with us as we go through this process of determining what is the best time and what is the best indication we can give to applicants, as well as continue to do service amendments, service requests, target market amendments, and answer general questions. And I also will say for the Native CDFI Network, as you all are working with your CDFIs and under institutions that want to be certified, again, on our website, we have a lot of information. We have monthly calls. There's a help desk where you can answer questions. So I encourage you all to work together to help each other complete the application. Certification is not a competitive process. So we hope that we will see additional applications from Native groups in the coming future. I'll stop there and then switch over to general program updates. In addition to the $1.75 billion, in addition to certification and all of the other things that we're working on at the CDFI Fund, we still have a number of programs that are either opening, or closing for this fiscal year. The first one I'll mention is our New Markets Tax Credit program. So New Markets Tax Credit is administered on a calendar year as opposed to a fiscal year. And our calendar year 2021 application round closed January 13th. This is the second time that we have received a authority to administer $5 billion in New Markets Tax Credits. So we're really excited about being in the second year of this 5-year authorization. We received a total of 199 applications requesting $14.7 billion in New Market Tax Credit allocations for the round of this program. So the team is currently in the initial phases of review. but they are scheduled to announce awards in the fall of the calendar year. But I also want to mention something that I'm sure you all are aware of and are highly interested in, is that we are launching a Native New Markets initiative this year. And to support this initiative, we recently published a request for proposals to secure a contractor to coordinate and administer a survey to various New Markets program stakeholders, to develop a self-assessment guide, and to plan, coordinate, and facilitate technical workshops for Native CDEs, community development entities, Native CDFIs, and other tribal entities that focus on investing New Markets tax credit Native areas. The initial research, analysis, and survey will identify the best practices from past New Markets investments in New Markets Native areas, and will be used to develop a self-assessment guide, which will allow groups to determine if they qualify as Native CDEs, as well as determine the areas where they may need to build additional resources in order to take advantage of the New Markets Tax Credit Program. We'll have training, we'll have a technical workshop and curriculum in order to share some of these best practices, and we'll also provide strategies and tools for current and prospective Native CDEs to successfully participate in the New Markets Tax Credit Program. So we expect to announce more information on this spring, and we will have an official kickoff, and I'm sure we'll connect with Pete and the rest of the Native CDFI network to make sure that you all are fully aware of what's happening under that initiative. The second program that I'll mention is our Native CDFI Program Assistance Award, or NACA program. Both the CDFI and NACA program were released in February 10th. Applications are due April 12th. The CDFI Fund anticipates announcing these two award programs in September for technical assistance. However, as we've done in past years, we will be announcing the financial assistance component later in the calendar year. We have done FA, financial assistance, and TA, technical assistance webinars, and those are now posted on the website for anyone who's missed them. We will also be holding a question and answer webinar for the NACA program on March 31st. So if you don't have the information, please contact us directly, or Pete, we can make sure we send you a link again if you want to send it out to your members. And then, as many of you saw in the final fiscal year 2022 appropriations, Congress provided a total of $21.5 million for the NACA program, which is an increase of $5 million over last year. So we were really excited to see this increase in our budget, and we're making that elevated level of funding available when making awards this year. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions related to what I discussed. I have some information on other programs that I can bring up, but I think I spoke fairly quickly and gave a lot of information. So I'll pause there to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions, and if you'd like to ask Michelle directly, feel free to. Okay, Joel?
Great to hear the increase in funding on the NACA pool of funding. How's that divided between PPC and the other additional programs, or is that all for the base?
It's all for the base, but we do have the 10% requirement under PPC. So it'll be at the top line, and then we'll take the PPC from the top line.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? No?
Okay.
Okay.
Seeing none, I'll just cover a couple more programs, and then I guess we can switch it over to Zachariah. Another program that you all may be interested in, and some of you did apply last year in the inaugural round, is the Small Dollar Loan Program. We made the inaugural round in September 2021, and a total of 52 CDFIs received $10.8 million in Small Dollar Loan Program awards. So we anticipate opening this program in the summer of this year. And just to recap, this is an opportunity to receive resources for loan loss reserves as well as technical assistance to stand up small dollar loans in your communities. small dollar loan we define as being less than $2,500. So that program will open in 2022, and we have $8.5 million to administer through the small dollar loan program. We are also working on closing our capital magnet fund. Our capital magnet fund is our affordable housing program. We closed that round in November of last year, and we had more than $380 million available for awards, making it our largest application round in the history of the capital magnet fund program. So right now we have about 146 organizations under consideration for that program, and we will be making those awards later this year as well. I will say, for anyone interested in tapping into that program, we will likely see another level year of capital magnet fund funding from the GSEs in this coming year, and they indicated just from their annual filings, this is Fannie and Freddie Fund, our capital magnet fund, that there will be roughly $398 million available for affordable housing. So please look into the capital magnet fund when it opens later this year. And then lastly, for our native CDFI banks on the call, we will be opening our Bank Enterprise Award round later this year. We're still working on the previous round, and we'll make those award announcements in the spring. So I'll stop there. I see a hand from Dave.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, Dave Castillo from Native Community Capital in New Mexico and Arizona. The Federal Reserve has opened up new Native or positions for Native initiatives in various of the districts. And I'm wondering, with all the new activity and opportunities for Native CDFIs through the CDFI Fund, do you anticipate the CDFI Fund opening and creating new positions to serve Indian country?
Great question, Dave. It actually takes me to some personnel announcements that I'll share as well. So as long as I've been with the CDFI Fund, and I've been with the CDFI Fund since 2007 in various capacities, we've always had an associate program manager for Native initiatives. Many of you may recall Clint Hastings was our most recent associate program manager, and he left the CDFI Fund a few months ago for a new opportunity. So we do have a opening in that position, the Associate Program Manager for Native Initiatives. However, we are looking at some changes internally about how we want to structure that role, because that role crosses multiple programs. We are thinking about moving it directly under our Director of Policy and Programs so that they'll have more of a cross-fund view. The current placement of that position is with the CDFI and NACA program, but Clint Hastings in his role and Amber Kuhar Bell prior to Clint did a lot of work working with new markets, working with other programs, working with Treasury on their Native consultations. So we are thinking about ways to elevate that role within the CDFI Fund, but we haven't made any decisions just yet. When we do actually post that position, we can definitely send it over to Pete, and Pete, you can circulate it through the network so we can make sure we get a highly qualified candidate list. And other personnel matters that I'll mention, which may be important for you all, is that Michelle is actually our first certification program manager. Michelle has been with the CDFI Fund for some time, and so she's our expert on certification. But prior to her being the certification program manager, certification was part of compliance. So if you heard the acronym CCME, that was our compliance and certification team. So we recently separated certification and compliance so that we could dedicate more resources to certification, given the importance of revamping the certification application, as well as helping to get through the uptick in applications. So there have been several positions filled. Michelle has a great team, a lot of new people coming up to speed. And as we see a demand in certification applications, we'll probably have to add a couple more people to the team. So stay tuned for that. We also have some changes in terms of program managers. Amber Bell, who was the CDFI program manager, is now with OSN, and so we are currently hiring for that program manager position as well. Dave, I see your hand up. Do you have another question, or was that the question that you asked? That must have been the question. So
Jodie,
I don't see any. Oh, go ahead.
I had a couple questions emailed to me earlier in the week from different individuals who weren't able to make today's call. One of the questions came in was, can the SSBCI bucket of loans be housed outside the native CDFI's internal loan portfolio? And can these loans be earmarked not to count negatively against your certification or your goals and measurements? Can they be housed within the native CDFI but not have an impact if they don't necessarily meet all the performance goals and measurements?
So that is something that is still under determination. So with all of the other Treasury initiatives, we saw this with, well, PPP was the SBA, joint SBA and Treasury initiative. But for example, PPP, when that program came out and we saw the volume of lending that CDFIs were doing, and they may not necessarily be in their target market, we made a decision to make an exception for counting those loans toward target market, for target market purposes. So we will continue to speak with SSBCI on this issue. I think what I'll do, Pete, is I'll follow up with you on that question when we have more of a resolution to that, just to try to understand more about how the SSBCI loans will impact investment in Indian country. And now that I see that Zachariah is on the call, I'll make a note to connect with Zachariah on that as well. But typically what we do for different Treasury initiatives is that we will make certain exceptions, or we will make certain determinations, and that'll come out as soon as we have that available.
Okay. And then this one may be similar. Let me see here. Yeah, it is similar, but regarding the SSBCI for native CDFIs that partner with tribal governments to administer program funds, where must these funds reside to ensure, okay, again, they do not negatively affect the native CDFIs federal certification status in the event of possible loan delinquencies and defaults, given the fact that some tribal governments do not have a loan program in place and the bucket of loans within this funding source may not be the best loans to have on your books. So those kind of go hand in hand. I think that was the question that they were asking as well. And I think that what they noted was that the PPP last time there was an exception made on those loans, and the gentleman who wrote this also, I had a conversation with him, and he was wondering if Treasury and the CDFI Fund could have a decision on something like this before May 11th, when the deadline was, in order, because that was going to be his determining factor of whether he got involved with the SSBCI program.
Okay, that's good to point out. I will say in the cases where we don't do blanket exceptions, I will encourage all CDFIs to contact whichever program that they have performance goals and measures under to see if they need to go through the amendment process. Because in some cases, we may not need to do a blanket exception, but we can work with individual CDFIs to amend some of their performance goals and measures. Or you can contact the certification team to see if there's a way, if it's a target market amendment or some other sort of amendment that may need to happen in order for the CDFI to maintain certification status or at least a good standing with the programs. So whenever these questions come up, we encourage people to let us know as soon as possible. Use our AMIS service request function. That's the best way to get issues to us, and that'll put it on our radar and we can get back to you.
Okay. Another question here was, with the increase in the NACA program funding for 2022, will there be a corresponding increase with the average maximum amount per awardee, or does the CDFI fund plan to increase the number of awardees? So is the number of awardees going to go up, or have you come to a conclusion on that?
We have not yet come to a conclusion on that. We're still waiting the final numbers for the applicant pool. The application closes in April. We sometimes make a guess based off of the SF424s that everyone has to file. And we did see this year a actual record increase in application over other years. So that type of program decision is usually made after looking at the batch of eligible applicants, as well as looking at what groups requested. So there may be some instances where we have a large number of applicants, but they're still requesting the same range of dollars that they had requested in the past, and so we can fund more organizations. Or we may have an instance where we have fewer organizations, but the request is much higher, and then we'll do another type of review to see if we can increase the average size. So we haven't gotten there yet. We're waiting the numbers in April, and we will send out something after we get the final numbers in April to let everybody know the distribution of the applicants across NACA and CDFI program.
And Ian, do you have a question? Or a couple mailed to you?
Yeah, so thank you, Jodie and Michelle. I had a question about the minority lending program, this new program. We're curious about how you guys are going to work to ensure that this program provides lending dollars to tribal communities that are proportionate to the size of the population, and also the disproportionate need that those communities typically have when it comes to the need for capital. So in other words, absent a tribal set aside, how will Indian country essentially get its fair share of those program dollars?
Great question, thank you. So without kind of unveiling the program before it's ready to be unveiled, I will say that we have taken a very close look at the disparate impacts of COVID-19 in communities across the country, noting specifically the impact that it has had in Indian country. And so what we've done, which you'll see in the application, is that we have designated certain areas as being those that have been impacted more than others. And as you all know, that those disproportionately fall into communities of color, as well as Indian country and other different populations, that we have been able to take census data, some COVID-related data, and create a new index. And so I think you will see that Native communities are well represented in that index. And the second piece of that is that the impact piece of this program is a huge component. So we look at impact across all programs, but for this one, we really want to know about the impact in the community and the impact that the CDFI is going to have with the funding. So I think it gives institutions who may be small in scale, who may have a small community that they're working with, the opportunity to tell their story and be able to access the funding in a different way than maybe it's been perceived in FA and some of our other programs. So I will say, I can confidently say that Native communities will be well represented in the lens that we use to make awards.
And Joel, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Going back, Jodie was talking about how PPP was treated related to target market on certification. Just to clarify, though, on the NACA award, we calculate a baseline of our lending in the past 3 years. Are we saying that PPP should be excluded from the baseline? Because that's not how I understood it.
No, it shouldn't be excluded from the baseline. You're talking for the application purposes?
Yeah, for application, as you set your baseline of your lending, even if your lending was inflated significantly from PPP, it would still set a very high bar based on the PPP lending that you did, and not have some sort of special exclusion like the target market that you talked about.
Right, there is no special exclusion under the program application. However, you want to note that in your application that you had an uptick in 2021 or late 2020 and 2021 from PPP. I think my next point of suggestion is going to be to contact the program just to make sure that they give you specific guidance on how to report that, but there is no exclusion for the program.
But is there like, I guess, leeway in setting the program goals that are usually formulaic based off of your 3-year history, that they could set that lower with consideration for the uptick that couldn't be reasonably sustained?
I don't know the answer to that question. So what I will do, if you want to send me your email in the chat, I will send it to the acting program manager so they can get back to you with that question. Or we can get the answer back to you, Pete, and you can distribute it to the network, however you'd like to do that.
That'd be great.
Okay, thanks so much.
We have a question from Ross Welch. Ross, would you want to unmute? And
yes, thank you. We're kind of unique. We are a non-native CDFI covering 6 counties, rural counties in Northern California. And we have 11 tribes in our area, and we've worked with all of them, not all of them, but most of them over time. We're a BIA guarantee lender. We've done individual lending to tribal members and tribal governments over the last 14 years. So a group of them might be asking to do an intertribal joint SSBCI application. In other words, all of them are getting between 430,000 and 950,000. Is there a way for us to help them? Because they're just like us. We're kind of out here in the boonies, but we have the lending experience and we've done it. We're also a BIA guarantee lender as well. Is there a way we can to pull this off? I mean, we're looking into it. They're looking into it to ask us to be the CDFI that's helping them get their funds out. Some of these tribes do have CDFI on site, but they're not. We're primarily business lenders. So, like I said, we worked with them before, so we could be able to help them get the money out over time. But does this sound doable? They're looking into it right now, but.
So I think this is a good time to pivot to my colleague, Zachariah, to take on the SSBCI question. Thank you, Ross.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jodie, and thank you, Ross, for the question. Great question. We're getting a lot of similar interests around the country on potential partnerships to be able to implement the SSBCI program in a meaningful manner to the tribes. So yes, absolutely. There's nothing within the guidelines that would obviate that sort of partnership, Ross. And I'm happy to have our outreach managers or myself connect with you directly to have a technical assistance call to be able to kind of dig into the program design. And just for everyone's edification, we've been having, ever since the December 11th deadline for tribal governments to submit a notice of intent to apply, we've been engaging with tribal governments, one-on-one consortia groups, stakeholders, partners, potential lenders that want to work with, be able to help tribes be able to deploy this capital. We've been engaging with them on one-on-one basis, technical assistance calls to kind of, put together their programs and kind of help them towards the May 11th application deadline. So I hope folks find that information helpful in terms of kind of being able to engage the SSBCI team to be able to, better understand what is and isn't possible. There are a lot of things that are possible, and we encourage these partnerships. And Ross, I'm happy to, if you drop your email or give me a chat message, I'm happy to connect with you offline and discuss that further.
Perfect, thanks.
And Zachariah, one of the things that, I've been in contact with Zachariah and his team this last week here, but I seem to get a lot of calls from native CDFIs, and their biggest concern, and we've already addressed it, is how the SSBCI funds could potentially have a negative impact upon recertification or certification. And so that would be, the question came up this week, should the deadline be pushed back again? And I think you would really sway a lot of the native CDFIs that may be apprehensive of getting involved if we could come to a final conclusion about, will it negatively affect, or can those be held separately outside of your normal loan reporting requirements, I guess, with the CDFI fund. And I don't know if there's I keep going back to that, but it would be nice to have some sort of resolution by May 11th, if that would be possible, because honestly, that is the number one question that I do receive from native CDFIs.
That's good to know. And, Jodie, I'm happy to connect with you and your team and to see how we can be helpful in that regard. So that's probably a discussion that we probably have, Pete, and hopefully we can be helpful to the folks here.
Yes, that sounds good. I wasn't aware of this issue, so I think we can resolve it by May 11th. We do have some time, but thank you for raising it.
You bet. Do we have any other questions out there for Jodie and Michelle while we have them available? I know they're busy. You guys seem to be on a lot of webinars, I see. Dave Toby has his hand up, I believe. Or Dave Castile, are you?
Yeah, sorry, my question is for Zachary. I know we're going to transition to SSBCI in a sec, so I'll wait for that.
You can go ahead and ask now, David. That'd be fine.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, Pete's comment about apprehensive is certainly a good way to describe it. We've been approached by a number of tribes here in the Southwest about SSBCI, and short of some venture cap proposals that still would need pretty significant support. We're having a hard time seeing beyond doing anything other than provide a debt facility that's amortized over 10 years and then refinanced every 3. And I know that's not acceptable, under the SSBCI program. The main issue that we're running into is we're dealing with extremely small populations and very limited interest from other lenders to come in and get us the leverage that we need on these transactions. I mean, typically, native CDFIs are lenders of last resort next to payday lenders and hard money lenders. So it just seems that the program isn't very well designed for implementation in Union Country. I'm wondering, Zachariah, given your outreach to tribes and tribal consortia across the country, are you seeing any best practices and models other than VC type approach to get the 10x leverage that's required by the program?
Dave, thank you for your question. It's a great question and one that we get asked and that we think about. It's too early in the program life cycle to be able to call out any best practices for tribal governments. However, having said that, there are a couple of modalities that we're seeing kind of starting to precipitate, and who knows where they go, but we think that they're probably in response to some of the challenges that you just mentioned. Number one, we see increasing interest in consortia, and tribes pooling their allocations together, submitting a joint application. One of a couple of issues that sort of approach mitigates is the absence of or lack of proximity to a financial institution lender or relationship with one that one or more tribes in that consortium may lack, but that one at least in that consortium may have. Right, so the idea is to kind of leverage the assets there and to be able to pool the capital together to make a program work. Of course, that also addresses issues with deal flow, et cetera, given the in-state definitions that the SSBCI policy program guidelines communicate. Another approach that we're seeing is utilizing is we've been in conversations with a number of larger financial institutions, native CDFIs, that want to be able to put together program offerings that could hopefully galvanize a number of tribes, right, and really kind of address this issue that you're surfacing here, which is a fairly common issue, right? So that that's work in progress, but we hope that something comes out of that, and that there are opportunities for some of the larger folks with a pretty large balance sheet to be able to go out there with program offerings that could then help hopefully galvanize tribes and be able to kind of have leverage their underwriting, leverage their internal processes to be able to deploy this capital. And lastly, so just still in the lending, not in the venture capital bucket, you have tribes thinking creatively about how to leverage the in-state definition, right? The ability to conduct loan activity, transaction activity in states within which their tribal members reside, right? So just kind of thinking really broadly and out of the box. Again, a lot of this is to be seen. We do not have a approved application for anyone, states or tribes at this point in time. We're still reviewing applications for states, for tribal governments. The deadline is May 11th. So it's it remains to be seen whether where these efforts go and how they end up, right? But I think there's a lot of creative thinking there, and I'm happy to, folks have ideas or resources they want to be able to share. Happy to make a note of that and have conversations around those.
Yeah, Zachary, I appreciate that. Just real quick follow-up. I'm sure you've heard this. I'm not going to name names here, but and I think that expansive approach might work for tribes that have a dispersed population, but in the Southwest where folks kind of reside on the reservation close to home, it's really and we don't have financial institutions serving reservations robustly, that the leverage issue is really the issue. And one of the things I've heard is from at least from one tribe in particular, they expect their SSBCI program to fail so miserably that they'll receive the first tranche of funds and just call it done, which I've really cautioned against, because we don't know what kind of the clawback provision or the compliance issues come from that. The only thing that I'm hoping, and maybe this is a question for Pete as well, is that if there's some kind of advocacy piece that we need to advance around relaxing the compliance elements of this. I mean, we could do 3x, but 10x is going to be a real stretch unless you would try to game it, and that just gets us out of compliance, or these tribes, the one that's been mentioning this in particular. So is there any realistic possibility that once the program is in place and allocations are made, that we can identify some kind of even secretary level waiver of some of these crimes, like we had in terms of the waiver for the match requirement of CDFI Fund? I mean, this program just simply was not put together with tribes in mind, and now we're having to kind of scramble to figure out how to make it work. Do you see anything happening on the regulatory front, or working with policymakers to give us some room to maneuver here?
Well, let me start for my quick thoughts on this, and then Pete, you can jump in as well. My quick thoughts are, so I'm hearing a lot of good areas where there may be opportunities for policy clarifications or areas that we can explore internally. There is absolute willingness within our part internally to be able to operate within the confines of the statute, right? To be able to make it work for all the 415 tribes that have submitted their NOIs. There's absolute willingness. on our end to be able to do that. So I'm happy to take these observations, communicate with Pete on how we kind of move this forward, what we do with this, understand the issues better. Keeping in mind, of course, that the deadline is there, and just to make sure that we're not going to be able to fix every problem. And I think that we have to be absolutely, clear about that. There's certain things that are in the statute that require legislative action. But having said that, there may be opportunities. We've responded, for example, by moving extending the deadline. We've done that in the past. And we'll continue to explore what we can do to be able to just facilitate this. But Dave, great question. Absolutely hear you loud and clear. So I've jotted that down, and I'm happy to kind of work with Pete to be able to see where we can go with this.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that, Zachariah. And the questions that I shoot to Zachariah always come from a native CDFI perspective. And one of the questions that I had received and visited with Dave a little bit about this too is where native CDFIs have a geographic region in which we serve. So the reluctance from some native CDFIs to get involved with this particular program came from so many tribal members live throughout the United States and several states. So if you were to enter into an agreement with a particular tribe, and over 75% of their population lives outside of your geographic location, that's the challenge for some native CDFIs, to protect their certification and make sure that they don't get out of compliance. So that's why I think it's really the importance of trying to see how we can position this to serve the CDFI and protect the CDFI, as well as working with the tribes. Does that make sense? Okay. And Jodie, that's kind of the challenge that I think some, like David said, there's a number of challenges with the SSBCI, and what we're trying to do is trying to work with the SSBCI to work it into the restrictions that native CDFIs have in place.
Okay, that's helpful context.
And I shoot Zachariah some strange questions, but when you're my age, you don't do nothing but work and watch TV and shoot emails to Zachariah at all times of the night. So
no, and I appreciate that, Peter, and I enjoy working with you, and I commend you for all the work that you're doing and surfacing issues. I mean, a part of the advantage in participating in these forums is the ability to understand what's happening, right? The pain points, so we can facilitate and ultimately make it work for the jurisdictions.
Hey, Zachary, real quick, sorry, I didn't hear see any hands, so I'm just going to take this moment. Do you have any examples of SSBCI being implemented in very small geographies, like let's say Samoa, that are, tribes are kind of like islands that are underserved and don't have tons of banks around them? So any examples there that we might kind of look to?
I like the way you're thinking over there, Dave. We do have a section on the SSBCI website, treasury.gov/SSBCI. There's a program archives section there, and within that section, there's a program reports. There's a good number of best practices, lessons learned. How the first iteration of this program, when it was deployed for states only, states, territories, and DC, worked with CDFIs, some lessons learned in that regard, but also to your point on how this program worked across all geographies to include territories.
Oh, we are coming up upon the hour, and I know Nancy Jordan had one question, and I don't know if it was for Jodie or if it was for Native CDFI Network about the positions that you would be opening up. Are they positions that can be remotely, your employment positions, or are they located in DC?
Positions at the CDFI Fund can be remote work.
Okay. And
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it might have been, I forget who made the comment, maybe it was Dave or Joel about the Federal Reserve positions, but I don't know about those.
okay.
I'm not sure which positions she was asking about.
And does anyone have any last questions for Jodie or Zachariah or Michelle? No? Well, I want to thank everybody, and I also want to. Oh, we have one last question that just popped up. Is there, Jodie? I guess this would go to you and Michelle. Is there a possibility that there would ever be a native advisory panel for the NACA program? A panel made up of native CDFI executives that would be meet with the Treasury. I know there's an advisory panel for the CDFI Fund in general, but not specifically made up of native CDFI leaders that would communicate about the NACA program.
So what I'll say to that is the CDFI Fund is unable to lobby. We can educate and provide information. So I will encourage you all to, I'm educating you on the process to set up an advisory panel. Our current Community Development Advisory Board is statutory. So opportunities to set up an advisory council would need to be statutory so we don't run into any of the federal advisory committee rules, which currently limits our ability to pull groups together without having statutory authority. So if that is something that is of interest to you all, and it sounds like a good idea to me, I am saying that that is the process by which you go by to do that.
All right. Well, it's right upon the hour here, and I want to thank everybody, and I want to apologize for the curveball I threw my panelists today. Somehow that link wasn't the correct one, so I do apologize, and it threw me a curveball too, so I kind of scattered. I was kind of scatterbrained when we first started there, so, and I think I introduced Jodie as Michelle, and so I was never good at baseball, never could hit a curveball, so well, I have everybody on the line here today, though. Please look at our Native CDFI Network website. Currently, we have our policy priorities up there. We have the white paper from Pilar Thomas, and then also we have our job announcements under career. So please take a peek at those. And again, I want to apologize to Kirsten and Ian for not properly introducing you, but when I was in the midst of my chaos of trying to gather our panelists here, I lost my notes. So anyway, you'll be seeing more of Kristen and Ian as we move forward here. So I thank everybody, and you got to be watching NCAA basketball this weekend, and you know, I guess go Peacocks. I'm kind of rooting for them right now. So Dave Tovey, I apologize to you for your team getting beat last night. That was sad.
Yeah, just throw some salt in that wound there, Pete. Thank you.
Yeah. So I got to root on my Creighton Blue Jays in the women's division. I think they're still moving forward. So anyone else have any final thoughts? And then we can go ahead and wrap up here. No. Okay. Thank you, Jodie. Michelle, Zachariah, I appreciate it. And I'll be in touch, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.